We want to welcome Walt Thompson today
Thank
to talk in ACSM's Distinguished Leaders in Sports Medicine and Exercise Science series. And I want to just start out with a little bit about your early career. Early, I mean, where were you born? Where did you go to school? Dates, that type of thing.
Yeah, that'll be a short story. Well, I'm kind of in awe because when you say distinguished leaders, I remember when I was an undergraduate, and I was fortunate to have studied under a couple of those distinguished leaders.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, never thinking that I would be sitting here. Well, I don't know about that. I'll let somebody else judge that. Yeah, I went to Wake Forest University as an undergraduate. And I had the very good fortune of studying under Paul Ribisol and Henry Miller.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and Henry Miller. Very fortunate to have Henry Miller as one of my mentors.
Oh, gee.
Because at that time, he wasn't the president of ACSM at that time, but about 2 years after I got involved in ACSM, he became the president. So he became my hero.
Yeah.
You know, because at that time, ACSM, that was back in 1978. ACSM had been around for a couple of decades, but it certainly wasn't the organization it is today.
Right.
But with Paul and with Henry as my early mentors, it was really an easy decision as an undergraduate student to decide that ACSM was the organization that I needed to belong to. So I joined in 1978, the same year that I got married. I'm still a member of ACSM. And I'm still married.
I wasn't gonna ask, actually. So let me back up a little bit. Where did you go to high school, and why did you end up going to Wake Forest? And did you go there to major in a particular? Did you go there because of a career goal you had already set in high school, an idea of what you wanted to do?
No.
Like a lot of undergrads.
Exactly. Well, I graduated from high school in Sparta, New Jersey.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but there were several of the earlier graduates that went to Wake Forest. And I was a friend with one of them. And of my class of 250 students that graduated in 1978, there were 8 of us that decided to go to Wake Forest.
Wow.
In my case, it was really just to get out of New Jersey.
I'm from central Pennsylvania, so I understand.
Okay. So yeah, so there's other 8 of us that went to Wake Forest, and 7 of the 8 of us ended up in the same fraternity at Wake Forest. I really went there for 3 reasons. One was to get out of New Jersey. Not that New Jersey's a bad place. It was just when I was 18, it was
ready to move on.
I was ready to move on. So the second reason was there was a bunch of my friends that were going there. And the third thing was that I was a track athlete in high school.
Okay.
And I was fortunate to get a scholarship,
a
track
fantastic.
scholarship.
Well, I'm glad I backed up. We would have missed that.
Well, yeah, it was $400 a year.
Which is okay. I mean, it's not the thousands today.
No, I know, but the tuition was only $2,500.
Yeah, I was going to say, the cost of college wasn't
Yeah,
as
so a
expensive.
$400 scholarship was a big
Were you
thing.
a runner, or what
Yeah, I
did
was
you do?
a sprinter. Yeah. I was
Body type for a sprinter.
I was a decent sprinter. I came in second in state finals.
Well, ACC is a pretty powerful conference.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of my record. I came in 4th in 100 meters in my senior year. It's a different story for a different day. But
Well, no, that's part of it. So, I mean, one of the things, the reason I've been sort of harping on this is that the commonality with 90% of the people I've talked to over the years is, in fact, an early interest in sports.
I can't.
It's very common.
I can't say that I had an interest in sports. You know, I just happened to be able to run fast. I played high school football. We had a small school, so we played both sides of the ball. But and we had a good team, but certainly wasn't a star football player. And I wasn't big enough to play in college, so. Baseball, I wasn't coordinated enough. So I'm not throwing. I just couldn't do that. And then other sports, tennis. Every time I picked up a tennis racket, I'd hit it over not over the net, but over the fence behind the guy. Basketball. Well, I was like 5'7", so I wasn't going to be a good basketball player.
Well, so what did you end up majoring in at Wake Forest?
Well, here's my dream, though. My dream was to, when I got to Wake Forest, and had to declare a major. My freshman and sophomore years, I majored in fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time I was a junior, I woke up and said, okay, I need a major. So I majored in physical education.
Was Ribisol in that department then?
Paul Ribisol was there, Henry Miller was there.
So Henry was too. Even though he's a cardiologist, I didn't put him in that.
Yeah, the thing about Wake Forest is they had one of the very first cardiac rehabilitation programs in the country, especially one that was not directly associated with a hospital or medical center.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of seeing cardiac patients there in the morning kind of intrigued me.
Mm-hmm.
Not that when I was a sophomore or junior I got up early in the morning, but I heard about it. So but my dream was to major in physical education and go back to my high school and be a football coach.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Fortunately, now in retrospect, fortunately, there were no jobs available when I was a senior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Wake Forest at the time was starting up a brand new program in 1978 called Exercise Science. There were no other exercise science programs in the country that were called exercise science. There were some programs that had coursework in exercise science,
Kinesiology,
physiology,
or
stuff
whatever.
like that. But Wake Forest, University of Wisconsin La Crosse, they were the first two that were really clinically based, that had cardiac rehabilitation programs right on campus. I just got married in December, graduated in May. My wife had a great job. We lived in this little 1,000 square foot house. There was no reason why I needed to get a job. So I didn't or I didn't look for one.
Yeah.
So Paul said to me one day, why me, I don't know, because I was not a stellar student as an undergraduate. But he said one day, what are you doing next year? And I said, well, my wife's got a job. I went through the whole litany. And he says, well, we're starting up this exercise science program. We're going to limit it to 8 students. Why don't you come on board and just stay here and do your master's degree? And I said,
Timing.
okay. So he was going to give me a scholarship and all that. So I said, okay, why not? I have nothing else to do. So that was kind of my segue into exercise science. But the thing that intrigued me was I always felt comfortable in a clinical setting for some reason. And working with patients. And that gave me a good opportunity at Wake Forest that we had patients, 150 or so patients on campus, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Wow. So I just had to get up a little earlier in the morning to work with them.
Now, did you have classes from both of those as an undergrad, both of those guys, Henry and Paul?
Henry was the medical director.
Okay.
He didn't teach classes as such, but he would come in and give guest lectures and things like that. But every day we had the cardiac rehab program. He was there.
Yeah.
So fascinating story about Henry Miller. This is a really funny story. We were learning how to do venipuncture, right? And my wife, she wasn't my wife at the time. We just knew each other, but we were really good friends. Henry was going to teach me how to do a venipuncture, right? So I'm real nervous, and my wife has got the tourniquet on.
She's the subject.
She's the subject, and Henry shows me how to do it. So I get up there, and I'm real nervous, So I finally stuck it in, put the vacutainer on, and filled it up. Took the vacutainer out. I looked at Henry. I said, "I did it! I did it!" I forgot that the needle was still in her arm. And there's blood dripping from her arm. And my wife, her name is Dion, she says, "You forgot something." It's the very first time I ever did a venipuncture. But if you ask Henry will remember that.
He'll give me more details.
That was back in 1978.
So that's the time you mentioned earlier that you really became involved with ACSM.
Yeah, joined in 1978.
Yeah. And you went to Concord. Did you present a paper early on? Or?
Well, my first encounter with ACSM, Paul encouraged us the 8 of us to join. I can't tell you how many of the 8 joined at that time, but I did, because I knew it was the right thing to do. The first conference I went to was in Washington, D.C., and I think that was in 1978, because by 1979 I was working. So 1978 or 1979. But I remember driving from North Carolina to Washington, D.C., and just being in awe of all these people that I read. Faulkner. And
here they are.
they're all there. And I distinctly remember riding in an elevator and Per Olof Ostrand walks in.
Oh, gee.
You know, and he's like a superstar to me back in 1978. And I wanted to introduce myself, but I couldn't speak. You know, I couldn't say, hello, my name is. I mean, he was a rock star. So that was kind of my first introduction. But we were so poor that we couldn't stay at that hotel, at the downtown hotel. So we stayed at the Iwo Jima Quality Inn.
Sounds interesting.
Which is about, you know, it's like $29 a night, something like that, and commuted in. But that was my first experience.
Well, then where did you go for your Ph.D. then? Or was that a Ph.D.?
No, it was a master's degree.
Okay.
This is another interesting, it's really interesting how you look back on your career and how things kind of fall in place. I graduated with a master's degree in December of 1979. Around Thanksgiving, Paul got a phone call from Dr. Noel Neeken. Noel is a cardiologist at Swedish Government Hospital in Chicago. Noel had talked with Phil Wilson, who was a friend of his. Phil Wilson was the director of the program at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Noel needed a clinical exercise physiologist. He needed somebody to come in and run his cardiac rehabilitation program. So he called Phil first. Phil didn't have any students that were graduating. So then Phil told Noel to call Paul. Well, I was the only one graduating in December of 1979. So Paul said, you need to go up there and interview. I'd never been in Chicago before. So I went to Chicago, interviewed. At the end of the day, Noel offered me the job for $16,500, which back then was a lot of money.
Yeah.
To me it was, because we didn't have
As a
any.
grad student.
Yeah, exactly. So I went back and we made the decision to take this job. So we traveled up to Chicago, and I was there about a year and a half, and decided that I really wanted to go into the university setting. Because part of the job was that I had an opportunity to teach graduate classes at Northeastern Illinois University.
Okay.
So it was all kind of rolled into this package, and I really liked it. I got to know the professors there. They were great people. They gave me great experience. That's what I wanted to do. Right? So I approached the hospital administration and said, I love it here. It's been a great job. I've learned a lot, but I really need to get a Ph.D. So they said, we don't want you to quit. You find where you want to go, and then we'll save your job for you.
Wow.
If you can do it in a year.
Oh.
So I said, okay. Well, I'll figure that out. So I contacted Ed Fox at Ohio State. And Ed agreed to see me. So I drove down, told him what my circumstance was. Fortunately, they were on the quarter system at the time, so I could load up in courses in a short period of time. Ed gave me a fellowship because I had some clinical skills by then. And they were testing patients, and they needed somebody that understood that. So I averaged 21 hours a quarter.
Wow, yeah, that's a big load. Yeah.
For a year. Finished up all the coursework in a year. At the end of the year, I took my comprehensive exam, passed it. I don't know how, but passed it, and then went back to Chicago.
So then you could work on your dissertation.
Did the data collection up there,
Yeah.
and graduated in June of 1983.
Wow, that's a neat story. That's probably the fastest Ph.D. anyone's ever.
I train doctoral students now. They don't do it in a year.
I'm sure.
So it was a right set of circumstances.
Yeah. So you get your Ph.D. 83.
Yep. Then went back to Chicago.
And worked there.
Worked there, and I think it was about 3 years later. I had the same arrangement with Northeastern, and I did some other college teaching, and knew that that's what I wanted to do. So it was, I guess it was 85 or 1986, something like that. We decided, my wife and I decided that we'd leave Chicago and find a university position. And back in the early 80s, like in the late 70s, there weren't a lot of us that had clinical skills.
Yeah.
And by that time, I had a lot of clinical skills. By today's standards, I had no clinical skills, but back then, if you knew how to take a blood pressure and heart rate, and you had some experience in the operating room or in a cath lab, you were golden. So I found myself very marketable. We spent 6 years in Chicago, and I had job offers from a lot of different places. I think it was about 5 different places. So you know how you put down the pros and the cons of all these jobs? They were all equal. Pay was the same, rank was the same, everything was the same. There's University of Northern Iowa, Purdue, University of, I think it was Connecticut, and University of Southern Mississippi, right? There was one thing that University of Southern Mississippi didn't have that all the other ones had, snow.
Oh, okay.
So we made our decision,
Coming from New Jersey.
our career decision based on how much snow, because we have our experience in Chicago. So I
Yeah.
went to the University of Southern Mississippi. I was hired as an associate professor there. Soon was promoted to professor. And then in 1994, there was this big party that was going to happen in Atlanta in 1996 called the Olympic Games. Georgia State University was developing an interdisciplinary research center, and they needed somebody to coordinate that center. So a friend of mine from Georgia State called and said, "You need to come up and interview for this job." I said, "No, I don't need to go anywhere. I've been at USM for 9 years and loved it. Just loved it. My kids grew up there. My daughter was about to go into high
What
school.
town is that in?
Hattiesburg.
Okay.
Yeah, and we lived in a little town called Petal. But my daughter was going into high school. My son was going into the 7th grade. Yeah, they're going into new schools, but you know, in Petal, Mississippi, they all go to the same schools. So we didn't think it was good timing, but I went there to interview anyway. And at the end of the day, the two deans who were kind of coordinating this offered me the position, and they told me the salary, and I said, well, we have to consider this one. So I went back and we talked about it, and didn't talk to the two kids about it. It was just my wife and I, because it was going to be such a big change.
Yeah, at that age,
Yeah,
too.
from Hattiesburg, Mississippi to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So we put together a package, and I don't know why, for some reason, Georgia State accepted all the terms that I put on the table, which never happens, but they did.
Yeah.
And so we finally told the kids that we were going to move to Atlanta. And you're right, I mean, it's never good timing. But I'm glad we did, because Atlanta's been very good to us. Georgia State has been extraordinary.
I'm sure the kids benefited quickly.
Well, I'll tell you what happened to my daughter. I was because Jessica was a little shy, a little timid. I was most concerned about her. We moved in June to our present house. Her birthday is in August. I think we had about 25 kids over for an overnight sleep birthday party. So she adjusted pretty well,
Yeah.
pretty fast.
Very fast.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
she's the one that was in high school?
Yeah,
Or
she was
in high school
entering
at the
high
time?
school. My son was entering the 7th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what have you been doing since you're at Georgia? You said you have doctoral students, and what kind of a program's going on there? And I'm sure they're involved in ACSM. And
Yeah, of course. One of my doctoral students is here presenting this year, and I make that mandatory. This program that we started, this interdisciplinary research center, lasted through the Olympic Games. After that, we closed it down and readjusted the labs and things like that. But my biggest passion right now is developing after-school programs for kids. I run a program in Atlanta called After School All-Stars. Today, we started soon after I got there in 1994, but really started writing the grants and things to support the after-school program in 1998. We started with a $150,000 grant with one site. Today, in 2010, I have 9 sites, 2,000 kids every single day, Monday through Friday, with an annual budget of $1.8 million.
that's a significant
So
achievement.
it really has grown. It does include structured physical activity, but it's much more than that. It's a comprehensive after-school program, mentoring, tutoring. We feed them a good nutritious snack. Yes, there's structured physical activity, but there's also what we call enrichment programs, the chess clubs and the debate clubs and
Underrepresented kids?
all inner city.
Yeah.
All inner city. We gauge what school we're going to go into based on the number of kids who qualify for free or reduced price lunch. I would say our richest school is 97% free or reduced price lunch. That's our richest school.
Wow.
So it's between 97 and 100%. So these kids, after school, they have no place to go.
And except trouble.
Except trouble, yeah. Our program is just middle school kids. plenty of programs for elementary school kids, but
Yeah.
middle school kids, we forget about.
Before we completely run out of time, when you got involved in ACSM and went to a couple conferences, gave papers, whatever, I know you've been totally involved pretty much all the time. Could you just remember some of the different things you've done? The committees, the projects.
Yeah, I'll tell you the
books,
one passion that I've had since 1978, and I'll tell you why in a second, is in certification. And the why is because in 1978, as a senior at Wake Forest, I took the exercise test technologist certification and failed it.
Okay.
I was devastated. So I took it again, and fortunately I passed. Much at the urging of Paul Ribisol, who was a little embarrassed that I didn't pass it the first time. And then in 1983, I took the program director certification exam and failed it. Fortunately, I took it again and passed it. But I knew that it was the exam that was the problem and not me. So I was appointed in 1983 to the certification committee. And I've been on that committee since 1983, serving in different capacities, including chair for 6 years. So I think that it's really important that we not only train young people, but make sure that they all meet certain standards. And certification is one of those things that we do. Recently, I've gotten involved as chair of the advisory board for the American Fitness Index. The American Fitness Index has become a signature program of
That's
ACSM.
become a hit.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. We have an incredible advisory board, and we have an incredible team that does all the statistics. I'm not going to begin to try to explain, right, because I don't understand it all. But it's become an expectation now that in May, ACSM is going to release the American Fitness Index.
And the rankings.
And the rankings, and where do the cities move, and we get calls from mayors, how can I move my city up the ranking? We had a great conversation yesterday from a representative of PAHO.
What is that?
The Pan American Health Organization.
Okay.
It's the regional organization of the WHO, World Health Organization.
Okay.
And he's interested in taking this American Fitness Index throughout North and South America.
Wow.
So that cities can compete against one another.
Yeah.
Our intention was never for cities to compete against one another. But that's how it's turned
It's sort of
out.
like the Olympics, right? Or the bid.
Exactly.
The host city.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they don't want to set up a competition, but that's what it is.
It happens, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm really proud of that. We're in our third year with the American Fitness Index, and I think it's here to stay.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of work, but it's not a lot of work putting the report together. It's a lot of work afterwards when people start calling you and say, "How can we change our infrastructure?"
But I guess that's good.
It's good. It's
I mean,
excellent.
it's
yeah,
movement in the right
it's
direction.
excellent. Yeah, it's excellent.
So,
Yeah.
well, finally, you've been in the college a long time. Where are we? Where are we going? It's clear it's growing. A lot of getting more involved, I think, in what do you call it, public service and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the most impressive thing that I've seen, especially at the annual meetings, is that we've been able to maintain a good level of science. You might get some arguments from some basic scientists that maybe we're not paying enough attention to certain aspects of science, but as I walk around the annual meetings, quite frankly, I don't understand half the stuff that these kids are talking about, but I know it's good stuff. Because they can respond to the questions from the audience very well. So I think we've been able to maintain that good level of science, but now we're starting to reach out into the community.
That's what I've noticed. I think that's been a major.
That's one thing, and the other thing is the impact that we have on public policy.
Absolutely.
I know that a number of us have been on Capitol Hill visiting congressmen. When I do it, I'm totally exhausted at the end of the day. But there's a lot of things that are going on, and ACSM is very well positioned.
Yeah, that was my. When the Surgeon General shows up and several congressmen, and you're doing something right.
And
got their attention at least.
Yeah, last night at the Exercises Medicine closing ceremony, one of my personal heroes, Jim Ryan, showed up.
Oh, really?
A former congressman, but he broke the 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
When I was running, when I was on the track team.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
I wish I would have been there. I missed
it's
it,
incredible.
so.
It's incredible.
Well, anyhow, Walt, thank you. I told you the time would go really fast.
It did.
So thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.